Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and I just watched the first episode of season 4 of Star Trek Discovery, and unfortunately, it's very disappointing. The show basically kind of tries too hard. It tries to do everything at once, it tries to cram in too many things at once, and none of them work well. So there are attempts at comedy which are not funny, there are attempts for exciting action scenes which just look stupid. The entire plot is kind of illogical, it's all over the place, a lot of characters are annoying, things don't make sense, there are scientific mistakes, there's too much focus on the visuals and not on the story, so all kinds of attempts once again for all kinds of cool stuff and for no reason. Like, for example, Book's ship goes out of the Discovery, goes in the wrong direction before he realizes he has to go to the other side of the Discovery, then his ship shapeshifts and breaks into pieces that go around the Discovery and then reforms the ship and then goes into the other direction. So this is just one example of a scene which is meant to be visually cool but makes absolutely no sense. Why did he go to the wrong direction? Why not go to the right direction right away? The only reason it was there just to look cool, and there are so many things like that. So all kinds of action scenes which makes no sense, characters whose behavior makes no sense, stupid decisions, stupid dialogue, all kinds of attempts at comedy which are not funny. If at least it was funny, then I would be okay with that. I would say, okay, this is now a comedy show, it's all just for laughs, fine. But it's not even funny, it's just kind of cringy. So all that starting scene with those weird aliens was absolutely ridiculous. So there are all those butterflies which connect with them and give them wings, and then they fly around and then they shoot at Michael Burnham and Book, who tried to give them a gift but accidentally annoyed them, and now they're chasing them and shooting at them, and then they're running toward the cliff and they almost fall off a cliff, and then Michael says, why is there always a cliff? At least the scriptwriters are self-aware of all these ridiculous things that they keep repeating, so by admitting it, it kind of makes it a little bit more acceptable, because if the characters are self-aware of all of this, then at least it makes it kind of funny, and so it kind of justifies it a little bit because it adds some entertainment value on top. At least that was the attempt. And yet this is especially stupid in this episode because they themselves chose the location, right? They parked the ship on the edge of a cliff, now they're running back toward their ship, and they're surprised there's a cliff there. Didn't they know there's a cliff there because they parked the ship there? Why even come down with the ship? Why not just beam down and then beam back up? They kind of forget about all kinds of technology they had previously, and this is supposed to be a more distant future, and yet suddenly they forget about all the technology that came before, like in that scene when they're trying to save that space station because it's flying too fast and that's somehow dangerous for the station in space, which makes absolutely no sense, and they totally forget that they have a tractor beam. They're not even trying to use the tractor beam, and they forget they have transporters, and for some reason they have to align the ship to move the same way as the station, and then they say they're in orbit of the station, which makes no sense because it's a tiny station, so how can you call it an orbit? So none of it makes sense scientifically, it all looks stupid, it doesn't add up continuity wise, because where is the tractor beam? How come the transporter doesn't work? Nothing works anymore. The shields now work differently, now they look like a grid, which I guess is the new kind of redesign of the visual effects. I think even in Star Trek Prodigy, when we saw a close-up of the ship's shields, it also looked like that kind of energy grid now, which is not the way shields look like in the past, and so this is kind of a redesign which somehow applies across the entire timeline. Now, in every time period in the Trek universe, it will now look like that somehow. So this is the kind of continuity retcons which makes no sense because they're kind of retroactively doing it across the entire timeline, and the same with the unnecessary redesigns of the aliens, and we do see a bunch of Ferengi in the background in this episode, so it's not just one Ferengi that looks different, which could have been explained away by saying maybe it's a cross between a Ferengi and some other alien. That would have been fine, but we see a bunch of Ferengi in the background in this episode, and they all look like that. They all look the same and in a new design compared to the old one. So once again, an unnecessary redesign of an alien species. And one of my problems with the Discovery aliens is that they often show like a giant head on a small human body. Like we see the bunch of aliens that look like Morn from Deep Space Nine, and their faces look exactly like Morn's, and so they look like a fat big face, and yet the body is small. It's like a thin human body with a giant fat head, and so the proportions just don't look right. And this is a problem I mentioned even from the start of the show. With the octopus head alien on the bridge, it has a giant head on a tiny, thin human-looking body. And so it just makes it look like a Halloween costume. It doesn't look right because the proportions between the head and the body doesn't seem to match. It doesn't make sense, and it just looks stupid, and it ruins the suspension of disbelief. So this is one of my problems with the Discovery aliens. They always just put a giant alien head on some thin body without trying to change the body itself to match. And so we see a bunch of examples of that in this episode as well. And as always, there's a bunch of lens flares. The camera is spinning all over the place again, which makes me physically nauseous to look at this show. I hate it when the camera spins around, and they have that scene on that station when everything is upside down, with everyone standing on the ceiling, which, I could have appreciated that there was a scene like that in season 2, when there was a fight scene in a corridor and everything was spinning around, and so they were kind of moving from the floor to the wall and then to the ceiling. So at least that looked kind of cool during the action scene. And yet here it's done for absolutely no reason. It's not really interesting. It's very simplistic. So they basically just turn the camera upside down, and that's how they filmed it, and that's it. And that's supposed to be amazing. I would have been fine with that if it was just, one moment like that, one scene like that, fine. But it's like 10 minutes of watching everyone upside down for absolutely no reason. And to introduce this new character of the Federation president, who looks like half Cardassian, half Bajoran, which is a fine idea. I'm fine with that. But it's funny how I predicted in the previous season that it's going to be a woman, because every single leader of a planet in the previous season was a woman. So they kept mentioning the Federation president without saying a name or a gender, and so I predicted it's going to be a woman, of course, and so that came true. And again, I'm totally fine with that, but it's kind of funny how much it happens. Like every single leader they come across has to be a woman. And if there's a white man in an episode, then he has to be an idiot and he has to be killed off. And it happened again in this episode. There was that leader of that space station which is spinning out of control, which is somehow dangerous for some reason. And he doesn't want to let Tilly and Adira do things the way they want to do them. And so, of course, he has to be killed off in the end of the episode because he's an idiot, Also, he kind of snaps and he points a gun at them because he panics. He cannot handle his emotion because he's a male. And so they have to kill him. And then they find his dead body in the end, and they kind of scan him, and it says that he's deceased. And then they don't even try to revive him. Like, the tricorder says he's dead. And so we don't even try to revive him now. He dared to question the women in the episode, so he has to be killed off because he's an idiot. So this is the kind of attitude that was always in this show. And individually every single example of that can be fine, but together when you look at the whole show and you notice how many things like that are in the whole show, then it becomes obvious that it's kind of deliberate, it's a pattern, and so it becomes kind of unintentional comedy. This is one of the things that actually is entertaining about the show, because the amount of stupid stuff is actually kind of funny in its own way now. So all these lame attempts at comedy which are deliberate and fall flat is still kind of funny in how unfunny it is. And so all those stupid aliens in the beginning of the episode which refuse to accept their dilithium and become hostile for no reason because Michael is using all kinds of idioms which they don't understand, and then they get pissed off. And so how stupid is that? Why is the captain even going on away missions? If she's the captain, why is she not on the ship? Why is she personally going down on some planets to meet hostile aliens? And why is she wearing that leather jacket when she goes down? Why is she not in uniform? Is she an undercover agent in this scene? Because otherwise it makes no sense. In the JJ movies, they also did that. When they went down to some planet, they were all wearing Matrix-style jackets, but they were undercover. They were pretending to be mercenaries or something. So at least it kind of made sense in the context of that scene. But here it makes no sense. Michael has to dress up in leather jackets to go down to a planet for absolutely no reason. And then she gets into a chase with these aliens, and then she refuses to beam out of the situation. Book keeps offering, let's just beam out of here, and she says, no, we have to give them that gift of the lithium so they will trust us. We cannot leave until they get it. And I keep thinking, why cannot you first beam out and then later beam the dilithium to them? You don't actually have to physically be there in danger to give them the dilithium. You can simply beam out and then give them the dilithium if you want it so much to give it to them. But why do you have to stay in danger? So it's the kind of illogical behavior that always pissed me off about the show, because it makes absolutely no sense why she has to remain in danger except because it looks cool. So they want to continue the action scene, the chase scene, the shooting scene, so they stay there for absolutely no reason. And why the need to jump off the cliff on top of their ship and only after that to beam into the ship? So why couldn't they simply beam into the ship right away? Why they have to stand on the ship to be able to beam back into it? And so this doesn't follow the established rules. Didn't they have those mobile transporters in the previous season? So why don't they use them? Isn't this the 32nd century now with more advanced technology? So why are they simply relying on luck? So they're running around these woods being shot at by the guys with the flying butterfly wings, which is the most ridiculous thing I ever saw in Star Trek. And it's not even funny, it's just totally ridiculous. And especially when they have those glowing eyes that is made out of butterflies. Like when the butterflies give them wings, they also give them like a mask with glowing eyes for absolutely no reason. Doesn't that block their view? Maybe that's why they keep missing, they're shooting at Michael and Book and they cannot hit them. Maybe it's because they have those butterflies on top of their eyes pretending to be glowing eyes. Maybe that's why they cannot see anything. So this scene was absolutely stupid in every way I can think about. And then they are running off a cliff, and then it's like a cartoon. Then they're running off the cliff and they stay on the air, and then it turns out they're on top of their ship. And then only after that they beam into the ship. So couldn't they do it before jumping off a cliff? Like, why take that risk? And then Michael is surprised that there's a cliff. There's always a cliff. But didn't you leave the ship on the edge of a cliff? So didn't you know there's a cliff there? So the dialogue makes no sense. It kind of meant to be funny and to excuse away the fact that this kind of thing keeps happening in every season, in every few episodes there's a scene like this. So it is kind of funny in a way, but it makes absolutely no sense in universe. Like, why would the character say that when she's the one who parked the ship there? And then there's a scene in the Federation headquarters which is no longer cloaked, and then Michael has to explain why it's no longer cloaked. Oh, there's no danger anymore, there's no reason to hide anymore, so the cloaking field is almost gone. So why almost? So that made no sense also. And then for some reason that we don't know, she hates the Federation president, I guess because she's a politician. And I'm actually on the side of the president, because everything the president is saying about Michael is actually correct. Like, Michael is taking unnecessary risks, she's endangering the many for the sake of the few and all of that. I'm actually completely on the side of the Federation president and against Michael. So again, it's like the screenwriters are self-aware of all the mistakes and flaws of the Michael character, but they're doing it in a way that still makes Michael look good. So they say things like, Michael has a pathological condition of wanting to save everyone. So it's like they're acknowledging a flaw in her judgment, but phrasing it in a way that still makes her look good. So it's like, when you go to a job interview and they ask you to acknowledge a flaw you have about yourself, but then you say a flaw which is actually something good about yourself. So something like, I'm a perfectionist, or I have too much empathy, I care too much about other people. So that's the kind of way they try to acknowledge the flaws of Michael Burnham, by saying that it's because she's too good. It's like she wants to save everyone, that's why she risks everything. But if you actually look at it objectively, it does make her a bad captain. She's a terrible leader because she almost gets everyone killed at every opportunity. And then she leaves the bridge to go on that suicide mission on her own, once again flying that bubbly tiny spaceship inside the bubble glass, which breaks easily, which makes absolutely no sense. Why did she need to go there? I still don't get it. And once again, self-praise, she's saying that she's the only one who can pilot it, she's the best pilot in the galaxy, and she's the only one who can go on this mission. So she leaves the bridge of the ship without even leaving anyone else in charge. Usually when the captain leaves the ship, he leaves someone in charge. He says, you have the bridge. But she leaves absolutely no one in charge. She keeps giving orders through the radio while putting herself in danger. And then her glass ship breaks. And then we have a slow motion scene of her hair flipping around in the vacuum and everyone's reactions. But then immediately she gets sealed into a spacesuit, and then it's totally fine. Absolutely no damage from being exposed to the vacuum. Absolutely none. No problem whatsoever. Just a minor inconvenience. And it's especially funny how her long hair was flopping all over the place, and yet when that suit automatically wraps around her, it doesn't cut off her hair or anything. Her hair is neatly tied inside the suit, even though it was flopping around in space all over the place just a moment before. So scenes like that just make it look stupid and unrealistic and just totally ridiculous. And she's totally fine after being exposed to the vacuum. Absolutely no problems whatsoever and never mentioned again. So that was the point of that scene of her being exposed in space. It was just meant to look cool. So her slow motion flopping around in the vacuum was just meant to look good, like a music video, or to make us worry about the character for a few seconds, I guess. And then she's totally fine after that. So totally pointless in terms of the story and the writing and the character and whatever, because no consequences whatsoever. And I actually like the fact that the Federation president, who went on this mission for some reason, is giving correct criticism toward Michael. At least it's some kind of self-acknowledgement of all these problems. But is Michael actually going to learn something? Is she going to acknowledge these mistakes? No, I'm sure by the end of the season, the Federation president will be bowing to her and saying that she was wrong and Michael was right, that the way Michael is doing things is actually correct, and Michael is the hero, and Michael is the best at everything, and Michael is going to become the president of the Federation in the end, I'm sure. Because that's how the previous season played out. Michael made a ton of stupid decisions like that, again and again and again, and instead of punishing her, that admiral actually praised her in the end. And so I'm guessing the same way will be in this season, because instead of acknowledging her own mistakes and stupidity, it will be the other way around, because that's how this show is doing things. And Michael once again being such an annoying character, especially her smugness. She's so smug, she's so sure of herself, she doesn't need anyone's advice, she's unwilling to take criticism of anyone. Remember back in TNG when Picard would actually take advice from his fellow officers, like he would call for a conference and hear everyone's opinions. And remember all those times when the ship was in danger, when he actually had to make a tough decision, like in that episode when, Riker and Worf went to save Alexandra from a fire, and they were in a region of the ship which had no shields, and Picard had to shoot torpedoes at the Soliton wave to save some planet which was about to be hit by it. And so he waited until the last possible moment, and he didn't know if they left that area of the ship yet or not, and then he did fire the torpedoes, knowing that it might kill them, because it was more important to save the bigger amount of people. So he made a calculated decision, as the captain should do. He didn't just wait to hear from Riker before he did that, as Michael would have done, because Michael has to save every single one. She's not willing to do any kind of decision for the benefit of the many. And so she's not a good captain, she's not a good leader. And the script is kind of half acknowledging that, but I'm sure later on it will be reversed. Like everyone will say, no, Michael was right all along. She's always right. She's the one who saves every single one. And so I guess it all depends on what they do with it in the rest of the season. If they actually have her pay for her stupidity, then maybe I will forgive this. If they actually kick her off the ship and make Saru the captain again after her mess, then maybe I can forgive all of this. But if not, then it will be extremely annoying. So that's my only hope for the show. As for Saru, he's still on his home planet, and they had a silly scene of all his people being underwater because they want to talk with those few Bauls who are outside in the water. And so it was kind of ridiculous because they brought back like 100 Kelpians underwater to talk with 3 Baul, which makes no sense, because wouldn't it be easier to bring the Baul to the surface and have them be inside some water tanks instead of bringing everyone under the surface to talk with them who are outside the window? So the way they did it, again, it was designed simply to look cool and to look beautiful, even though it makes no sense. So if they bring Saru back as the captain and they kick Michael off the ship, then maybe it will be forgivable. But if not, it will be extremely annoying. It's also funny how in this episode they replaced Mr. No Response with a different black guy who takes his position, and he also says no response. And so that kind of made me laugh, like, why replace him with a different character who looks like him in the hopes that no one will notice it's not him, I guess, and then he says the exact same lines. The only difference between them is that the new guy is smiling more, like he keeps smiling for no reason. Even when he says there's no response, he's doing it while smiling. So that's the only difference between him and the previous no response guy. So why did they replace him exactly? I have no idea. And they added a bunch of new strange aliens, and there's even a tribble in the corridor, and a bunch of Ferengi in the background. I guess after Starfleet discovered the dilithium planet, and the lithium is the most expensive material in the universe right now, So once that happened, Ferengis immediately wanted to join Starfleet because, they're still greedy or whatever. But now they all look totally different for some reason. So I guess they all got mutated somehow. So it will never be explained, probably, just like all the other aliens who got redesigned were never explained. And all the minor characters are once again not given anything to do except look good and smile and things like that. And Adira shaved her head for some reason to look more like a boy, I guess, because she's not a boy or a girl. And her invisible boyfriend, who is also a woman, appears and she talks with her on the bridge, and no one around her notices or cares that she's actually talking to herself, that she's standing on the bridge and talking to an invisible person, and it doesn't bother anyone. No one notices that. That's totally fine and not confusing for anyone else. And so that's kind of, again, pointless and annoying and stupid. And Adira actually was a character with a lot of potential, which they totally wasted, and she became a worse character than how she started. I expected her to actually grow as a character and to be developed, and instead they did the opposite. Instead, she became an annoying, illogical character which makes no sense and talks to an invisible boyfriend, girlfriend, who wants to have his own body, and they totally forget that they actually have holographic technology and mobile emitters and all of that. They totally forget about all of this kind of technology, and then they go to that station to save it because it's spinning too fast in space or something, and that's somehow dangerous to it, which makes no sense. And they forget they have a tractor beam, and then they have to match the speed and rotation of the ship with the station in order to beam over, which was never needed in previous shows. And they're extending the shields around it because some rocks collide into it, and the rocks explode when they collide with the shields. At least they did mention something about the rocks containing methane or something, so at least it kind of justifies the fact that they explode in fireballs when they hit the shields. And the inside of the ships also keep exploding with rocks and fireballs and all of those things that always were in Star Trek, so at least that's consistent. And then Book's planet blows up, which was the funniest part for me, because remember in the previous season, Book spent his entire adult life finding those giant worms which were stolen from his home planet to bring them back to his planet. And now his entire planet gets wiped out, and so all those giant worms died, and so they all died because of him. Because he brought them back to his home planet, and then they all got wiped out. So great job spending your whole life bringing those worms back, and then they all die. So this is kind of ridiculous. And once again, the nihilism in the show, that they love to blow up whole planets and all of that. They just love it. All that nihilistic, dystopian disaster, all for the sake of some drama, some emotions. So, oh, we have to make Book emotional. How can we possibly do that? Let's just blow up his entire planet and his whole family, and then we'll have some drama and we'll have him cry about it or something. So this is the sort of kind of over the top kind of silliness, trying to make everything epic, all about blowing up whole planets. The only thing I kind of like about it is that now it will make sense how they cannot use his people to pilot new spore drive ships, because they established in the previous season that he can actually pilot the Discovery's spore jump. And I said back then that if his people can do that, then they should have no problem replicating the spore drive and recruiting his people as pilots, and then they have no problem. But now that they wiped out his entire species and he's the only one of his kind, then it solves that problem. So that's the only kind of smart thing about all of that. But I think with the worms that he spent his whole life rescuing them and now they're all dead, that is kind of funny to me. That is kind of ironic humor. So in my opinion, most of this episode was garbage. There were a few good moments. For example, there was a moment when they introduced the Archer shipyard, and then we heard the Enterprise music playing, and we see some kind of new ship, and then they're saying that they're building new ships to explore space again and all of that. So for a moment, for a very brief moment, I thought that maybe they will finally go back to the old Star Trek formula, which was actually about exploring new civilizations and new planets and all of that. But nope, it was just one scene like that, and then it's right back to epic galactic destruction and saving the entire galaxy from some anomaly which wants to destroy everyone and blows up whole planets, and it's all epic and it's all over the top emotional because Book lost his entire species and the whole galaxy is about to be destroyed and only Michael can save everyone. And so they once again go back to that over the top silly action crazed formula instead of actually giving us good science fiction stories about exploration and all of that. So they had some moments with potential, but then they totally throw them away and go back to the old formula of Discovery, which kind of sucks in my opinion. So that's all I really had to say about it for now. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.